Today on Primary Care, we're on location at Plymouth United Church of Christ to speak with Dr. Ijeoma Opara about vaccine hesitancy.
When it comes to vaccine hesitancy in the African American community, that hesitancy or hesitation is earned, is very well understood.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lonnie Joe, and welcome to Primary Care, the show dedicated to improving the health of African Americans. There continues to be a lot of talk these days about vaccine hesitancy. The World Health Organization defines vaccine hesitancy as a delay in the acceptance or refusal of vaccination despite availability of vaccine services. Vaccine hesitancy is not new. It has existed since the late 1700s when the first vaccine was developed for smallpox. With all of the misinformation and controversy surrounding COVID-19, vaccine hesitancy threatens to reverse all the progress that has been made in eradicating vaccine-preventable diseases. My guest today believes much of the reason behind vaccine hesitancy, particularly among African Americans, is due to misinformation and distrust. Dr. Ijeoma Opara is a double-boarded certified assistant professor of internal medicine and pediatrics at Wayne State University here in Detroit. She is also a scholar and activist doing work in the area of health, justice, and equity. Dr. Opara, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to see you.
The pleasure is all mine, Dr.
Good.
Joe. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for all that you do in this area.
Thank you.
You know, we are suffering with this thing to no end, seems like. Even after going through the height of the pandemic and what's still continuing to be the tail of the pandemic, we still have this hesitancy among people, in particular African Americans, who seem to be the least vaccinated and in a lot of instances needed most than others. Where are we going with this? Why do we suffer with this disease called hesitancy so much?
Thank you, Dr. Joe. I think that's a powerful question. I want to sort of help reframe us a little bit, kind of level set. I want to actually name that the group that is actually most, quote unquote, hesitant around vaccines are white Republican men, usually in rural areas. And it's important to name that because what I don't want us to do through the lens of justice is to sort of allocate the blame for the low vaccination rates among our communities to African Americans. Yes. That is more of an equity issue in the ways that the vaccine has been made available and accessible to our communities. And I really want to name that because the ways in which structural racism and white supremacy works inside of healthcare and public health is to locate the blame on the individuals, the communities that are marginalized.
Sure, and social media has gotten good at that.
And social media has gotten very good at that as a tool to propagating this as an example of disinformation.
But yeah, you and I, recognizing the data, we don't treat rural white farmers.
Absolutely.
Okay, we treat African Americans. We make the separation and the distinction.
Absolutely.
I think that's very important because when it comes to laying blame, we know what's going to happen.
We know exactly what's going to happen. And so when it comes to our communities then, these lower rates of vaccine intake or uptake really is a combination of some well-deserved and understandable hesitancy, right? And so when I talk about mistrust and distrust, I don't really frame it around that. I frame it around the trustworthiness of the healthcare institution. In which ways have our institutions proved themselves to be trustworthy or worthy of our trust, and the ways that they have failed to do so historically and currently. So when it comes to vaccine hesitancy in the African American community, that hesitancy or hesitation is earned, is very well understood. And it's so important that we name that. Otherwise, it goes back to that blaming and shaming, which doesn't help at all to actually address the very understandable, valid questions members of our communities have before they make decisions that come to their health.
Right. So if we can give credit where credit is due, we can also give blame where it's necessary.
There you go.
So here again, are we making progress in this arena? Are we recognizing what the problem is? Are we beginning to make some progress? Are we getting the message out?
I believe that we are. And I really, speaking of credit, want to credit particularly Black physicians, Black nurses, Black public health professionals, and public scholars, and community members and trusted messengers, folks that have come together, students that have come together to have targeted messaging that come to our communities and speak in a respectful way, right? And honor the history of medical appetite and experimentation inside of the racism that we have experienced institutionally in the healthcare, public health, and medical spaces, right? Naming that and honoring that, and then sort of using that, well, while we honor that, using that as a leverage towards saying the truth as to these are the facts as it relates to the vaccine, and this is why it's important that we protect ourselves from the harms of this pandemic. And so many folks from our communities have done that hard work, going door to door, beating boots on the ground, and answering people's questions one-on-one, caring about the things members of our communities care about. Because folks will be like, well, y'all care about the vaccine now, but did you care about the fact that we haven't had a job in so many, years, or when I came out of prison, nobody wanted to look at me and hire me, or I have a friend or a cousin who's struggling, can't have access to food, or haven't been able to pay rent, or have been unhoused. Those things we call the social determinants of health that our people unfortunately get the short end of the stick on because, again, of racial segregation and other manifestations of structural racism. So we have been able to couch the issue around vaccine access and availability and vaccine equity of vaccine justice in a holistic basket that says we care about you as a human, we care about the fact that you don't have access to healthy, affordable foods, let's work on that. Healthy, affordable housing, let's work on that. Even as we make sure that you are vaccinated and protected against this pandemic. So it's so important that members of our community that have gone out there door to door and meet people where they are to answer those questions and address those concerns have been at the forefront of ensuring that we're getting closer to vaccine equity when it comes to our community.
Isn't it amazing how when we open the window in this big house called healthcare, when we open the window to some of these disease states, how vaccines leads to all of those dominoes that you call social determinants of health around the table. And helps us understand that we do have a responsibility here.
We do.
If I am not serious about one aspect of this,
right,
it really points to whether I'm serious about another aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Just name an issue, they're all connected, they're all interrelated,
yes,
they all have a basis of affecting one another, and vaccines are the same way. How can we talk about vaccines and you don't have proper food to eat or proper housing? I mean, they're, to some degree, they're one and the same.
They are one and the same. And that's some of the feedback that I got because I, too, was out on the ground. Earlier on, we were talking about social media and on social media, but also in the community addressing this issue. And some of the feedback, because when you're about advocacy or activism, 80% of what you're doing is listening. The other 20% is that you do something or you say something, but 80% is just listening. Ultimately, folks just want to be heard and seen and valued. And so in so doing, one of the things I heard was saying they only care about us getting vaccinated because they know it affects them. Is one of the feedback, that I got. So folks like Auntie Maya says, the great Maya Angelou says, folks may not remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. Mm-hmm. And folks just ultimately want to know that they're valued and cared for who they are and how they are. And so the vaccine messaging really was dropped. The ball was dropped. And so being able to coach that within the sense that, no, we care about all of you and everything related to you, whether or not it seems like it obviously is connected to the vaccine, was, I think, a very powerful turn that many of us from our communities who are also healthcare professionals took, that made it effective for us to, again, move towards vaccine justice and vaccine equity. We're not there yet, Dr. Joe, but we're closer than before when it was just the CDC, God bless them, and other folks of that nature.
But it was very good to see the the collective effort, even though it never rose to the degree that we thought it should in this country or this community. But it was very good to see the collective effort happening.
Yes.
If we can get it right in healthcare, we can solve a lot of the social ills of this country and anywhere else. I mean, we have all the elements that we press on, whether it's economic, educational, social, language barriers, ethnicity. All of that is embodied in healthcare. And as a result of us getting it right in healthcare, we can get it right in government. Well, maybe, but here again, dealing with politicians, but here again, we can get it right in so many other areas, the workplace, okay, the neighborhood. I mean, it extends itself to all of the things that we do as human beings and what we're involved in. All of us have the same interests anyway. How come we can't be united in terms of having that common interest, get to the same outcomes that we want? That is an outstanding overview that you just gave about how we have approached this thing. But I think that we're onto something here if we were to listen.
If we were to listen.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. Tell us about the role of the primary care physician in all of this discussion.
Oh, the primary care physician is central to this conversation. It goes back to what you're saying, Dr. Joe. Our ability to connect the dots. I think that is a powerful position because oftentimes, unfortunately, things seem very fragmented. Well, what does health have to do with, like you said, the government? And what does, my housing have to do with my food? It's all interconnected. And
but we're existing in silos.
And that's the problem. And Dr. Joe, if I may propose, intentionally. Because when we exist in silos, we are less effective.
Sure.
We're less effective to make change. We're less effective to build the communities that we need to collectively act and organize for creating the environment that we want, for accessing the resources that we need, right? It is intentional for us to exist in silos, to think in silos, and to act in silos because it's less impactful or effective. But I believe from an Afrocentric standpoint that as Black peoples, we have that inherent way of looking at the world and operating that understands that the key Swahili proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But you want to go far, go together. So we have to work together. And I think we know that inherently. This is how we've survived, I believe, even until now. And the coming together forces us to understand the power of intersectionality, that everything is interdependent and interconnected. And that must inform our organizing, the ways that we advocate and work towards getting the things that we need to achieve the life that we want. It has to be together and it has to be intersected. So you're right. That siloization, shall we say, is intentionally designed because it allows a power structure within society to remain the same. And for us to believe that we're somehow powerless, and we're not.
We need to get back to the Old Testament lesson of dry bones and how they connect to become life.
To become life.
Yes, Doctor, we're up against a break. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us for more of Primary Care.
Hello, I'm Pastor Nick Hood, the third pastor of the Plymouth United Church of Christ, located in the heart of Detroit, as I like to say, the tip-top, the medical center area of Detroit. I want to thank Dr. Lonnie Joe for the opportunity to say a few words about healthcare and the role of the church with healthcare. At my church, we're blessed to have a number of physicians who are members of the church, many of whom are with the DMC, and very often we call on them to share health news and health awareness for the congregation because in the African American community, we experience some of the worst cases of health care in terms of diabetes, mental health, heart disease, cancer, and as a pastor in the heart of Detroit, I think it would be a crime not to take advantage of the know-how of the doctors. I want to thank Dr. Lonnie Joe for giving me an opportunity to just say a word. I have immense respect for Dr. Joe, and I hope that together we can make for better health care in this community. God bless and God keep you.
Welcome back. We're here with Dr. Ijeoma Opara, Assistant Professor of Internal Medicine and Pediatrics at Wayne State University School of Medicine. Doctor, vaccines, for many, many years, but kind of in the pediatric world. And now, thank God, have been extended and we know better, so we do better. We've extended them. We have newer vaccines. We have vaccines that are very, very safe and work in a lot of arenas. But focus a little bit for us on pediatrics, which seems to still bear the brunt of what we're dealing with in the vaccination world. And my entire career, pediatrics has been a shortage area for us. The availability of physicians, the location of physicians, physicians who look like the people that I'm referring to, all of the merit of things that we see in this arena. Touch on that a little bit for us, including how we're doing on the educational side.
Yeah, so you're very right. It's still a challenge when it comes to addressing vaccine uptake in our communities for children. We do okay in the younger ages, and I think a lot of it also has to do with school. If school requirements that if you're going to, you got to be, and that comes back to that concept of intersectionality we were talking about earlier, right? How everything is dependent. What I believe really increased uptake in the pediatric population in terms of vaccines had to do with, when the educational system got involved, which is also related to government. So everything kind of is interdependent. As kids get older, we start seeing sort of a drop-off in terms of the uptake of vaccines. There's been a lot of work being done in terms of educating our parents. And because we have to name the fact that disinformation campaigns, and by the way, Dr. Joy, if I may educate our audience a little bit, there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation. And misinformation is inaccurate and incorrect information that is provided, not with any sort of malice behind it or bad intent. It's just folks don't know. It's just not correct. So then you correct it and you move on.
Let me stop you there, because most of the time it's not intentional.
That's right.
It's the intent.
It's the intent. And you're absolutely right. And that's what makes it disinformation, when there actually is malicious intent or malevolent intent, the intent to do harm by virtue of that information, to actually make sure that folks are not going to take certain decisions that is going to be harmful to them and community at large. And so with misinformation, we could kind of address that, you correct it and everyone kind of moves on. But the disinformation gets really problematic. And that's a lot of what we see when it comes to what sort of drives and informs parental hesitation for their children to take vaccines. And there's a taking advantage or an exploitation of the parent's natural desire to protect their child from anything that is harmful. So it really falls on us as frontliners, and I would say, public servants when it comes to health, to start to message more effectively that these are safe, as you said, effective, and is for the child's benefit. And not just the child's benefit, but the family and larger community benefit, and sets the child up for good health now, but also later in their life. So this is work that is cut out for us every day.
Yeah, we've got a tough assignment here.
We do.
One of the mistakes I think we made early on in this community, like so many across the country, in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, was that people who appeared at emergency rooms or urgent care facilities were told, you're not that sick, or you test positive, go home and quarantine. And in a community like this, multiple family dwellings, small dwellings, one kitchen, one bathroom, multiple people. I mean, all we did was create a milieu, an environment, a spread of that disease, which brings me to one of the questions. Our great research staff here pointed something out, that 51% of the pediatric practices turn away families who refuse CDC-recommended vaccines. I thought that was interesting, in that our intent is one thing, and to help people, but at the same time, if our rules and regulations are so stringent, or the area that we find people in, we can't seem to connect and bridge what we have to them, we wind up we play hardball. And we turn them away. I mean, this is a sad fact of what we do in this community.
We have to do better. You're absolutely right. We say that oppression or systemic oppression, interpersonal oppression, what have you. And I use that word generally because it covers all the isms, sexism, racism, all the isms, ableism, is in the impacts, in the results.
Right.
Not the intent.
Outcomes-based
It's in
medicine.
the outcomes, absolutely. So we may feel like, oh, we're coming at things from a wonderful place and from a righteous place, shall we say. But if our decision-making, our processes, our policies and practices result in disparate outcomes, inequitable outcomes, unjust outcomes, then I'm sorry, regardless of intent, those practices or set of policies and processes are oppressive. And so it is so important that, a family may have declined, I hesitate at the word refuse, declined guideline-directed vaccines, etc. But why? Have we taken the time to understand the reasons? Some of their reasons are legitimate. And like I said, most of the time, folks just want to be heard and valued. And sometimes you got to work with people. We have families in our practice where we work with them. Maybe the kid doesn't get all the vaccines at one time. We'll do a little now. They'll agree for, okay, let's just do 1 or 2, doc. Let me see how they react. And then when we come back, we can do the others. That's okay.
Exactly.
You got to meet people where they are.
Exactly. And just because you have the data, you have the knowledge, you have the vaccine, and you're the doctor, does not mean that the patient does not deserve to arrive at a place of understanding of what you're offering. And a lot of times it is the communicative process.
That's right.
And our inability to be acceptance of their hesitancy, not to the point that you agree with them, but to the point that you work with them.
That's right.
In order to get a different outcome.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about in terms of professional physician education as well, okay? And the people in this healthcare arena who provide services. Yeah, I got 1,000 questions for you.
I know, Dr. Joe, and I love all of them.
Talk to me briefly about shingles vaccination, which is commercialized, of course. But talk to us about shingles vaccination or the lack thereof in African American community.
That's right. So we have 2 shingles vaccination. Again, shingles is the herpes zoster, illness from when we were exposed to one of the herpes viruses as children at some point, and we get over it. But the virus, that sneaky little thing, goes and lives somewhere in our bodies and just kind of chills out for a bit. But later, when we get older and we're stressed in some kind of way, it can show up as rashes, painful rashes that show up in our body. And they can be quite debilitating, especially for our elders. So we do have, again, a vaccine to prevent this illness. And you can get one at 50, and then there's another that you can get older at 60. I encourage folks to get it the earlier the better, right? That's a whole 10-year difference. I mean, if you then developed shingles, that would be like something you could have prevented. So that's something that we encourage folks to get as well. And I want to say, I think in our communities, we do a good job, actually, at least in my practice, of getting the shingles vaccine. I think kind of because folks have seen other people have it and how painful and debilitating it is. Folks are pretty good in terms of uptaking that. I also want to name something that's important, Dr. Joe, very quickly. When it comes to vaccines. And again, I usually come into medicine, I approach healthcare medicine, my work from an Afrocentric standpoint, from a standpoint of Black liberation and Black excellence, okay, unapologetically. I want to name that, the science of vaccines belongs to us. The science of vaccines were brought to the Americas by an enslaved African named Onesimus. He brought the African practice of variolation, which is also practiced in other parts of the world, but that we really developed this way of preventing serious disease by introducing a little bit of the disease and watching and monitoring and supporting the person so that they became protected against a severe disease of whatever that infection is. That was introduced here into the United States. That was by an enslaved African, by a Black man. And so when I tell us, medicine as a field was developed in Africa, the first physician, Imhotep, from Africa. This belongs to us. And so when I frame conversations and educating our communities about health-related issues, including vaccines, I say, honey, this is your heritage. Own it. Take full advantage of it because you're worthy. You're worthy of being protected from preventable illness, you know?
So the other thing that is part of our heritage and in our history in this country is religion. So let's double back a little bit here.
All right.
You know, the church's role in this whole hesitancy issue. I mean, we've got to split in a community like this. Let's face it. You can go to one service. I mean, we're in this beautiful sanctuary here who has been an icon in this community, but there are iconic locations, iconic people in this community who you can get totally opposite opinions on vaccination based on a religious performance or lack of performance to say no, we don't believe in it and we're going to pray. And over here, as opposed to someone says yes, we believe in it and we have it available for you out in the lobby. I mean, this hesitancy has been disproportionately dealt with by our own community. In terms of this, so I think we need some education along those lines also. Do you see the church as having a role in this discussion?
The church has always had a role when it comes to the Black community in every aspect of our lives, and certainly in health. And I always try to remind folks, remember Luke, that the whole gospel was named after a physician, okay? And so it's so important that we have, again, coming back to intersectionality, that members of our communities in the healthcare field and members of our communities that are in the church field and the religious field are doing work together. Again, that siloization, right, Dr.
Exactly.
Joe, that we talked about, we have to disrupt that.
Exactly.
We need more communication, more collaborative efforts and activities in our same communities, working together with our religious leaders in order to improve and better the health of the community as a whole. The church has a pivotal role, is a trusted messenger. So what folks say on the pulpit matters. And so we want to make sure that we are not vectors of disinformation and misinformation.
No matter where it comes from.
No matter where it comes from, but that we are vectors of the truth. And ain't that the job of the church?
Absolutely.
To be able to facilitate the spreading of the truth.
I don't know where we thought that we were so smart that we decided that we could separate health from the church. And that's right. I mean, the hospital was born out of the side door of the church. You go back.
There you go.
I mean, look at Peter's house. If you ever visit there and look at it, there's a hospital there that was an integral part of what they did, as well as a hotel and ability to feed people. And I mean, they actually were taking care of the sick down the hall. It was integrated. There was interconnectivity that said that this is how we intend to take care of this community, okay?
Right.
And you know what the basis was the scripture and basically what was being taught from the pulpit. I mean, I look at the revolutionary unofficial Apostle Paul when he said at the end of his career, he said, Luke is the only one left with me. The physician who said, we're going to stick through this message that needs to be spread, where we talk about what God intended for us and what he gave us to use. These are all blessings from God anyway.
They're
all this knowledge,
yes.
all this science that we love and get excited about.
Yes.
It's no different than these lights that are on in this room that we rely on and never think about.
Absolutely.
And we don't question until they go out.
There you go.
Then we start questioning or the light bill gets too high.
That's right.
Then we question that.
Then
also.
we start questioning. Yeah.
And Doctor, this has been such a pleasure. We could do this for hours. We will do this
should.
again. And we will do this again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Joy. It was such a
today.
pleasure.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you
Good.
so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Our guest today has been Dr. Ijeoma Opara, Assistant Professor of Internal Medicine and Pediatrics at Wayne State University School of Medicine. Thank you for watching. For Primary Care, I'm Dr. Lonnie Joe.